Let's bring in the current Celtics head coach, Brad Stevens, joining us as well. Brad, thanks for taking the time. Obviously, a very emotional day around here, the NBC Sports Boston studios, and obviously with the Celtics, the loss of a legend. Just give me your thoughts on Tommy Heinsohn and what he meant to you.
Well, obviously, Tommy, incredible. Obviously, what he accomplished on the court and throughout the game has been well documented, but just the person he was to me, he was a mentor to all of us. He was always available, had several phone conversations, in-person meetings, lunches over the years where I just loved to pick his brain and hear his stories. I was telling somebody earlier today that the part that I enjoyed hearing most about was the part before I was born, playing for Red and then coaching and all of the stuff that he tried, all the stuff that he took from Red and then how it impacted him. But one of the game's all-time great winners. And I think when you've lived in people's living rooms the way he has, with Mike on these broadcasts for, almost 40 years and certainly before that with the national broadcasts and then before that as a coach, before that as a player, an amazing career but just a terrific guy and a terrific mentor and we will miss him.
Brad, when some of the stories, the one thing I remember the most is him being in the media room and it felt like he had a million stories. Do those stories, when he comes and talks to you, they always have something that ties into coaching the Celtics in ways that you can improve, or sometimes he's just stopping by to tell you a story?
Well, I mean, most of our conversations with coaching obviously went to running and went to playing fast and putting people on their heels and, just like when he called the game. And I think the last time that I talked to him about more of a strategy as we entered the season was last year. I gave him a call right before the season and asked if he had ever rotated centers like we were planning on doing, because I knew that he played small on several occasions, but certainly we talked a little bit about the idea of hockey subbing centers, and to think about he's already been through that, and that was 40 some odd years ago. It's incredible. But all those stories when he would sit down, it was just fun to listen to. I mean, the greatest thrill in coaching the Celtics, other than the chance to be around the players and staff and be in TD Garden, is when those former greats come back and come through practice. And I heard Kuzi on the phone right before I got on. And, we've had a chance to see a lot of them. And it's been sad that a few of them have passed, including Tommy. And but what a special group, and the game's greatest winners. That's inarguable.
No doubt, Brad. I think one of my lasting images of Tommy, it was 2 seasons ago, I think it was. The team was struggling a little bit, hit a rough patch, and before the game, Tommy and Al Horford are sitting on the bench. Tommy sort of counseling Al Horford. Can you speak to just, the counseling sessions Tommy's had, not only with you and the players, and knowing the fact that it's coming from a great place, a warm place that he just wants the best for you guys as players and coaches?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I didn't see him as much in those pregame sessions. I very rarely saw him because I'm doing the media circuit and in my office, and I'm not out on the court doing the warm-ups. But he spent a lot more time with our assistant coaches and our players. And so, ask any of those guys what he meant to them, and they speak the world of him. When we had learned that he was sick and we were in the bubble, we talked about it with our team, and and every single one of those guys has been impacted in a positive way by Tommy. And so he cares about those guys. He cares about the game. He loved the Celtics. And I heard Scal and Kyle, you saying whether it was 55, 45, whatever it was when he would call a game on a national broadcast, he was he was 100-0 with regard to percentages with his bias towards the Celtics. He may have been able to hide it, as good actors sometimes do, but it was 100-0.
Yeah. What do you remember most when you first met him?
I mean, just first of all, I mean, he was a huge personality and a huge person. And so he walked in, and I remember sitting down next to me, and I'm pinching myself, Scal. I'm 36 years old. I just left Butler, and Tommy Heinsohn walks into the gym and wants to sit down and talk hoops, and I don't really have much to say because I don't know half as much as he does. So it's, I would just say that, that was what I remember from our first interaction. But he was such a good person, and again, such a good mentor to so many, that I see all these videos as I'm speaking that he was what's good about the game.
Yeah, and I think, people don't know how often did he show up at practice. And that's the thing about Tommy. He just loved basketball, too. Can you speak to those times that he came to practice, Brad? And I didn't know until I spoke to Tommy, how often he showed up at practice and actually talked to some of the guys.
Well, he didn't show up as much in the last few years, obviously, but early on he was there a little bit more, and but it was always just like, you could tell, and I think Scal would second this. When you've been there as a player and then as a coach and been around the game as long as he has, he just loved being in the gym. And whether it was watching an open gym in the preseason in September, watching an early practice, coming by in the middle of the season, whatever the case may be, you could tell that he just loved being there. And, it was obviously really important to him. But the way that he shared his story and shared basketball with all of us was special.
Yeah, it's amazing. He's been a part of the Celtics organization for like 60 years, and him and Mike Gorman have been together. Can you even imagine, think about the NBA as we know it now, just being a part of one team for so long and doing so many different things for that team? Like when Kyle mentioned it earlier, just the fact that this guy bleeds green, and like this is really, he is the ultimate fan of an organization. I don't know if there's anybody else like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably starts with the foundation of the way that they all won, and what they were able to accomplish on the court as players, and then obviously his success as a coach. And he didn't coach forever. He obviously had a fairly short tenure, I guess, in coaching terms, but then has spent, again, the last 40 years in everybody's living room. I mean, I just think about all of the different facets he hit, the fact that he's basically a Hall of Famer in everything he's ever done, just speaks to him. But it's, I think that the one thing that I think sometimes, people will talk about his accolades today, and people talk about what he achieved as a player, what he achieved as a coach, how he kept us all entertained. But, I think the cooler part of the story is he was a better person, and he was a great mentor, and he wanted to impact people in the game. And that's what matters today.
No doubt. And Brad, can you speak to Tommy as the coach? Because the game has changed since he was a coach, but yet you still sought his counsel. What was it about Tommy, even though the game, had changed so much in the 3 or 4 decades since he last coached, that you still was able to seek his counsel and wanted to hear from him?
Well, the game goes in cycles, and I think that there's, you can kind of point to that over the, several different eras of basketball. The game does go in cycles. And if you look at some of the things that he was doing, some of the ways that they were playing, they were, I think probably, and again, I haven't watched hardly anything other than maybe over the start of our quarantine months, maybe a game or two that you all were replaying. But, he talked about playing small. Again, he talked about rotating centers. He always talked about playing fast. he always talked about being aggressive and being the instigator and being the initiator. And I think that those things, obviously translate era to era. And then I'd say the other thing that translates more than anything is just, the ability to sow into and invest in people. Obviously getting a chance to play for one of the great coaches in any sport of all time in Red Auerbach, and then getting a chance to coach that same organization years later as he did and have the success that he did, obviously you want to pick the brain of those people.
Yeah, the more I got to know the stuff he did with the NBA Players Union, the idea that he sold insurance while he was still playing, as a Celtic, it's amazing. The more I got to know him, the more I wanted to be him. Did you know all those things coming into it? Not just Tommy Heinsohn, the player, coach, and broadcaster. He's also a very successful artist as well.
No, I learned that over time, just probably like you did, Scal. I mean, I'd heard the stories of all those guys playing in the 60s and 70s, finding, other work, right? I mean, it's not the market that, we have today. And we often talk about how thankful all of us in basketball, but certainly players, coaches, et cetera, should be for all of the work that everybody's done before us to make it what it is today. It's been built by others. And when you look at, especially here in Boston with the Celtics teams of the past, what all of those players did, those coaches did, how invested they were in the community, how hard they worked on the court, how hard they worked in their other jobs. As you said, Tommy became a great painter. Those are things that I got to learn over time. But listen, we're all incredibly grateful for the foundation that them and other players around the league and coaches around the league laid for all of us.
Brad, did you ever get a chance, over the last 7 years to hear Tommy, the broadcaster? I know you break down film, but is that usually silent, or do you have sound up? Do you go home and rewatch the games and hear Mike and Tommy?
I very rarely listen with sound unless I know there's a play I want to listen to, Kyle. And you can guess which of those plays were with Tommy. As I've said many times, I get some flack because, people want me to be harder on officials. I think officials would probably tell you I get my point across here and there, sometimes well, sometimes not well. But I always leaned on Tommy. I also had a guy telling him everything that he thought in front of the whole world. So I had a little bit of an edge there. I guess I'm going to have to pick up the slack. But I always, I would occasionally turn on a moment of that game when I knew Tommy may be a little bit edgy.
Well, what would you do if they teed him up and you had to give up the point?
What can you do, right?
Hey, Scal, I'd have paid the fine.
That's it right there. That's it.
The fine.
He would have got a second one for sure.
Yeah, then we would have started negotiating. Those would get a little bit expensive.
No doubt. All right, Brad, thanks so much for coming on the show and lending us your perspective. Looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks. December 1st, the season kicks off in terms of training camps. Then December 22nd, it'll be here before you know it. Thanks so much, Brad.
Yeah, and all the best to Paul and the rest of the family. We will miss him dearly.
So let's bring in Celtics president of basketball operations, Danny Ainge. And Danny, you've known Tommy for decades, going back to the 80s as a player. Thanks for coming on. Just give me your thoughts on the loss of this great icon, Tommy Heinsohn.
Well, it's obviously a very sad time right now with losing Tommy last night. Tommy was, I consider him more than a mentor. I mean, he was a great friend. Started back in 1981 when I signed with the Celtics. I mean, he was an encourager. He does everything he can to try to lift you up and keep you positive and tell you how good you are when things aren't going so great, when the rest of the world is down on you. At the same time, when you're doing great, he has a good way of coming to you to keep you humble and saying, hey, like that's the time he would do some teaching. I've always appreciated Tommy and his approach, his love for the Celtics. Everybody knows that. But his love for each individual person is what's really my memory of Tommy. That and when, I have a funny story. When we were watching, my kids were watching all the old Celtics games during COVID, and we had Tommy on all the national broadcasts. It's the same Tommy. Like he's yelling about how we got to run. And that's why the team is not winning, because they're not playing up tempo. And the referees weren't very good. So those are a few things that we share in common. And I think Tommy has ingrained that in me.
Danny, when you first got to Boston, were you familiar with Tommy Heinsohn, the player, Tommy Heinsohn, the coach, Tommy Heinsohn, the broadcaster, when you first got to Boston as a player?
As a player, I was familiar with the Tommy Heinsohn as a player. I was not that as familiar with him as a coach, and I was not, even though I knew that he coached, in the finals, 1976, when, as a junior in high school, and I was very much into that. I just didn't know that much about him as a coach. And I really didn't know anything about him as a broadcaster when I got there in 1981.
Danny, what was it like, and what is it like, I guess, knowing that your team broadcaster, Tommy Heinsohn, you don't have to worry about him. He's always on your side. He's you know what? I might not be able to yell at the officials you're thinking, but Tommy will take care of it for me. What's that like? What's that been like for you?
Well, I mean, I do my share of yelling at officials myself, but having Tommy do it on the air is fun. I find it entertaining. The fact that he was such a fan and such a homer for the Celtics, I thought it was endearing to Tommy. I think that we had a lot of chances to talk basketball, so I knew what he really felt after the games. It wasn't always so positive about the Celtics and what we were doing right, but on the air, and he always gave that impression of just 100% support of the coaches and the players. And the players have always appreciated that from the time I was a player to now. Players know Tommy and have appreciated that of his support.
Danny, what are some of the stories that you remember most that you were just absolutely blown away by? Whether it's, Tommy, when they first started, how the NBA and how they played, and the fact that he had to have a second job in selling insurance to him as a coach.
I think the funniest stories are the ones he used to tell about Red and how tight Red was when it came to reimbursing them for cab fares and train fares to get to practice. Like it was a $2 reimbursement. Red wouldn't do it because they were a minute late. And, just all the stories of Red and how tight he was and how tough it was for him in negotiations, contracts. But yeah, just getting an expense reimbursed was tough enough. Tommy had so many great stories about all the players. He genuinely loved Havlicek and Cowens. JoJo White, like those were his guys. He loved them and loved that era of basketball. And it was fun to hear him tell all the stories of he's been there through the whole history. Right. He's seen it all. He's got opinions of everybody. And that was why he was fun to talk to on the bus, on the plane, and pick his brain when I was a player. He was really a very well-educated guy who understood the game and understood people.
And we're watching video now, Danny, of you and him chatting, and we just saw a video of you guys after the championship in 2008. What do you think that meant to Tommy, that 2008 championship? Because, one of the lasting images is his smile and how much joy he had for you guys in the organization. What do you think that championship meant to him? And what did it mean to you to be able to help deliver that?
Yeah, obviously Tommy was very excited and very happy about that. But I think Tommy was happy for me. He was happy for Doc. He was happy for Paul and KG and all the guys. More than he was happy for himself as a lifelong Celtic. I think he was really happy for the group of people that had just won a championship that hadn't been won so long in Boston. That's the thing I appreciated about Tommy. He won enough championships, but he wanted to see the success of everybody else. And he spent a lot of time sharing his insight, sharing his opinions, but also being positive and trying to build us up.
Danny, the NBA, do we lose him or is he still there?
I'm still here.
We're going to get him back here in a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Danny, the NBA has changed so much, yet a lot of things that Tommy has done and said in the past are still are what we're seeing right now. Have you, during all this time, his message of running and playing fast and you got to fly all over the place, you got to rebound, is that something that you've thought like, man, if we need to do more of that if we're going to have some success?
I have felt that way since 2003 when I got this job, and my first conversation with Tommy was that I had spent some time coaching, and I agreed with Tommy, but like he hammered it home, like it was plain as day to him that you have to play with up tempo. You can't let the defense get set. You got to get the ball out of the net, even out of made baskets, and push the ball up the court. You have to be in great condition. And in order to do that, and you have to practice it and work at it because it's not going to just come by saying it. Those were Tommy's messages, loud and clear to, I think, every coach that's coached here and everybody that's worked here.
Danny, how do you want Tommy to be remembered, not only from the fans, but also organization-wise also?
I think he was just a very loyal person who, like I said earlier, cared about the individuals. Yes, he was loyal to the Celtics, but he was loyal to each of us as well. I mean, he often talked to me about my father, who's about the same age. He got to know him back in the 1980s when my dad would come to games occasionally, and they've maintained communication and a relationship since then. He just cared about you as a person. And in all the different hats that I've worn in this organization and over the years, I mean, that's what I'll remember most about Tommy is, going into that back room where he's just sitting during the game and just talking to him about life and about basketball and sharing stories and laughing. And, he just had a way of making tense and stressful situations less tense and less stressful. And always brought a smile out in me, and I'll always remember Tommy for his kindness and his individual support.
Danny, any advice to Scal? Scal's filling those shoes here.
Well, Danny had to fill Red Auerbach shoes. Those aren't easy either. So, I mean, he is qualified to give me some advice.
Yeah, exactly. How do you follow a legend, Danny?
I think that Scal just needs to not be so political. He tries to be political. He needs to get over that and just, he needs to emulate Tommy. Like pick your side and stick with it.
Oh, I don't
be
waver.
objective. Pick your team, Scal. Now pick it.
There you go. We
Pick
put you
the
on
winner.
the spot.
Pick your guys and stay
I
with
got
them.
it. 2021
And
champions,
Scal,
Boston Celtics.
And Scal, the other thing I would say is, you have a lot of talents like Tommy. I mean, you're a very personable guy. You love to talk, and you love to be around the players. You have a lot to offer, and I think that you've been around the game your whole life, and you're a smart guy. So I think you can learn a lot about Tommy of just being a support and being around the team, and is I think important in doing your job even better, knowing what's going on.
There you go.
Well, it's kind of hard.
Advice.
Kind of hard during a pandemic, but right? I think you're talking about moving forward. They didn't let me in the bubble. They weren't letting my kind.
You're making excuses already, Scal.
Danny.
I asked to go down to the bubble. They said no.
No, because you wanted to take the family and have
Put
them
the
at
mask on
Disney.
and show up here, Scal.
You let me know. I'm ready. I'm in good shape. You got games going on right now. I'm ready. You got some guys you want to work with. Let's go.
And Danny, we got the draft coming up, and we know historically Scal works out a lot of guys
They
for the
don't have
draft.
anybody there.
Oh,
By the way, how's the draft going? Who we taking?
Who we getting?
The draft. I talked with Tommy about a week ago, maybe 8 days ago, somewhere 7 to 10 days ago. And, he was really with it. And he was asking me about my father again. He was asking me about the draft and, what the team's going to be doing. And he was completely in the same frame of mind as he always had been. Here he is, on his deathbed, and he cares about the upcoming draft and other people. And the draft is, seems so insignificant on a day like today.
Right.
But we put a lot of time over the last 7 or 8 months, and we'll be ready come draft day. But it doesn't seem too important right now.
No doubt about it. All right, Danny Ainge, Celtics president of basketball operations.